Hi there, dear listeners. Sean Williams here. The Word Docs might be in lockdown, but they have new books out in the wild. I have two. Her Perilous Mansion, a novel about kids stuck in a house that might be haunted, and The View from the End of the World, a collection of short stories all about the end of the world.
And I'm Alex Vickery Howe, and my new play is called Watchlist, about a virus that changes the world.
And I'm Amy Matthews, and my alter ego Tesla Sue has the conclusion to her 4-book Frontiers of the Heart series out now. It's called Bound for Glory, and it's a rollicking western.
Now, on with the episode.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome to Word Docs. This is Alex Vickery Howe. I'm here with the brilliant Sean Williams and the extraordinary Amy Matthews. Although I'm not physically with them, we are separated by many, many miles. This is all happening during the period of extended social distancing. But it's great to hear your voices.
Hi.
Hello. It's great to hear yours too, Alex.
Shall I
Very
sing
sonorous. Yeah, why not?
Would you? That would be great. What do you know?
No one wants to endure that, I don't think.
Do you take requests?
No. Only if it's a karaoke bar and I've had many, many drinks. I did a fantastic version of It's a Sin by the Pet Shop Boys once in Tokyo. And
It's a great song.
Once you've done that once, that's the peak, and then I can never do it again.
You figure your job is done, you need to retire.
I need to retire and I hide. The great thing is that Japanese people were just turning the lights off and on, like complete strangers were like doing a whole kind of, ooh, isn't this scary kind of thing. So anyway.
That's fantastic. So were you in this scenario of the nightclub singing this song, were you the hero or the villain?
What a great way in.
That was so well done.
It was so subtle that I had to point it out and ruin it. I think, well, if you're singing It's a Sin by the Pet Shop Boys, you have to be the villain, right?
You might be the good guy, though, being judgy about people sinning.
That's true. Or someone who's deeply remorseful or regretful.
Or forgetful.
Or forgetful. So yes, well, it was the general vibe was pretty dark.
So villain. So you would. Does that mean you have a natural tendency towards being a villain?
Well, one of the things I spoke about, I think it was probably in the last podcast, was this idea of past, present, and future thinking. Remember we talked about that?
Oh, yes, that's
and
right.
we were saying people kind of situate in one of those three spaces. And I said that villains are always future thinking. They're always planning and scheming. So I'm quite attracted to villains because they're the ones who've actually got
Plans.
Something in motion, something to do.
Well, they're not passive, are they? Villains are never passive.
They're not passive. They're not reactive. And I'm a bit of a planner, I think. So, I haven't got any dastardly plans, but I can relate with the sense of trying to get something done.
So are you a planner? Can I just hold on that thought? So you think about being a planner as a villain, but as a writer, do you plan? Do you plan where your plot's going?
I do, but I don't stick to them.
Yeah, which is villains too, right?
Yeah, you think it's all going to be one thing, and then you have this dastardly whim, and you kill off a major character. So yes, it is a bit like being a villain. What about you, Sean?
As in planning or plotting, or being a villain or a superhero, or all of the above.
Oh, let's
all
stop
of the
that.
above.
Do you think you are more attracted to being? So if you think about writing as being an actor, and which characters you're more attracted to writing, are you more attracted to the villains or the heroes?
Well, I can tell you that my very first acting role, which may have cast me in a particular role for the rest of my life, was playing a villain. I played a pantomime villain in my grade 7 class. I had a pop-up cap and a very sharp knife and a painted-on moustache, and I enjoyed that so much. I think I'd probably have to go down the villain path.
The first thing I ever had to play, and I had to do it 3 times in primary school, was the Virgin Mary.
That explains so much.
The first thing I ever played was when I was about 6 or 7. I was a Daisy in Alice in Wonderland wearing a leotard. And I remember crying because I had to wear a leotard, and I thought it would undermine my, 7-year-old masculine vibe. And crying is the best way to express your masculinity as well. I don't know where I've
also
heard
explains
this.
a lot.
It also explains a lot. I don't know where I've heard this, but they say that your first crush, and it's usually a fictitious character when you're young, right? Your first crush informs your kind of, your type, if you like, moving forward. And my first crush was the Wicked Queen in Snow White.
Really?
He's definitely a
There you
villain.
go.
Look,
Mine
second
was-
most beautiful woman in the land, just for the
It's
record.
always a queen with you, isn't it? Always a queen.
Mine was Sarah Jane Smith, who's definitely a heroic figure. So
Oh, yeah, that's valid. Yeah, that's
I'm
valid.
not unhappy with that. Amy?
I think
Are
mine
you
was
willing to-
River Phoenix in Stand By Me.
Oh, poor old
Dark.
tragic river.
Yeah.
Poetic.
Soulful.
Yes,
Brooding.
just like Johnny.
Johnny, who is Amy's partner, who we hope to hear in a podcast soon as a
Yes,
special
because
guest.
the thing about lockdown is it's hard to get guests. Not to undermine
Luckily, you
him,
live with one. That's good. Getting back to the kind of hero-villain question, I definitely am more attracted to writing villains, and I think it's a problem because you can't have the villains win in every story. That's
why not?
Maybe you
Start
can.
a
I don't know.
genre. Just do it.
Pick the right
do
genre.
seem to be attracted to quite unpleasant narrators as well, and then having to try and make them sympathetic. But I quite like those characters. I really quite like the slightly mad characters who are really unpleasant but actually love watching them. It's like Scarlett O'Hara, right? She's a real
Yes.
cow, but you quite enjoy watching what she does.
Well, it's the like watching a car crash in slow motion, Scarlett O'Hara,
Yeah.
in a way, which is, I don't know, just as valid an experience. But I'm not sure that I would like her. I would hate to be around her in real life. Just
Yeah.
awful.
Well, it's funny because writing romance, you have to have the heroine, right? And a lot of the dangers for romance writers are writing a girl or a woman who's too good, is too kind of flat and boring and milk-soppy and good. So you see a lot of emerging romance writers. It takes them a while to kind of nail a character who's kind of zesty and interesting because your instinct is to make your hero too good. And the good person is so boring, like Prince Charming, right? Is really boring compared to the Wicked Queen.
Well, that's why they did, in the Disney version of Beauty and the Beast, they turned that on its head with Gaston, I think, so brilliantly. Taking that Prince Charming character and turning him into this vain, misogynist monster. I thought they did that super well. I wonder sometimes...
And if you were an actor, that's the part you'd want to play. So as a writer,
absolutely.
they're the characters you want to write. So I think that's why my secondary characters often steal the book.
Yes, I think that happens a lot. Do you think it's perhaps... I wonder whether it's a reaction to the fact that all three of us are teachers, so we do have to be on our best behaviour throughout the day. I always feel like part of our job is to be the dancing monkey in a lecture room and be, upbeat and enthusiastic and passionate about the work and treat all of the students with, respect and be a sort of nurturing presence. And so then sometimes when you go back to your own work, that kind of Mr. Hyde persona kicks in and you think, I just want to write someone rotten now and get it all off my chest.
So Dr. Alex and Mr. Vickery Howe. I quite like the sound of that. Perhaps. I mean, I found when I was writing Star Wars novels that the characters I was most interested in were the secondary characters, and I quite enjoyed wrapping stories around them if I could, the characters in the middle. Whereas writing lines for, say, Lair Organa or Darth Vader, I mean, they were fun, but there wasn't much you could do with them, partly because they were locked down by the franchise. You couldn't write a story about Leia having a nervous breakdown and or whatever, or Darth Vader patting a puppy. They're
I would read the
territory.
book. I would fear for the puppy,
Vader
but I would read
and
the
the
book.
space puppy.
That's
What
right.
about, though, I mean, you created Starkiller, right? Or you wrote, I mean, I know it was
Yes.
based on a game, but you fleshed that out. That's a character who's hovering between
Yes.
darkness and light, and that's an interesting space, right?
That's right. He was really interesting to write because he was an abused child, now a teenager or early adult, and that was a really interesting character to explore. A child that was raised by an abusive monster, i.e. Darth Vader. What's that character going to be like as they're exposed to more and more positive influences? That was really fascinating and fun to write.
And how much of that was sort of pre-written or pre-designed, and how much of that was coming from you?
All the dialogue in the script was pre-written. I was very careful to keep to the exact script, but a lot of the internal thoughts and agonies which were implied by the script were brought out by me in the book, and that was great fun. I enjoyed that a lot. Following the breadcrumbs to the character within.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because there's like a sketch there. There's like a chalk outline of a character, but then you get to kind of fill it, with all of his internal baggage. I think is really exciting, and and as a character, not quite as fixed as a Lair Organa and a Darth Vader, I suppose.
In terms of process, Sean, how do you go about that? Like, how do you go about fleshing in that chalk outline? Do you brainstorm? Do you just daydream? Do you write drafts? Like, do you go through character sheets? Like, technically, how do you start doing that?
In the Star Wars universe specifically, I would approach it like I would a historical novel, a real historical person about which a few details I know. Like Alex and I are currently researching Colonel William Light for a possible novel we'd like to write together. So the first thing we've done is got a biography. We'll read it, find the gaps, define the chalk outline, and then work out where the gaps are to make the character interesting. And that was very much the same with the Star Wars novels, that you are given the shape of the character broadly, but there is lots of room within the universe to add things, add nuances, add suggestions of character or overt explorations of character just through the universe that's around the person. And I guess in a game, there's less room to explore context and nuance, in most games anyway, than there is in a novel. So you kind of have to, if you want to write a good novel, go down these paths to find ways to make them feel more real. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
How about you, Alex? How do you go about developing like your heroes or villains?
I still think I've got an actor's brain from going to drama school, and so one of the criticisms I still get as a writer, not when I write for performance, but as I'm dipping my toe into writing novels, is that I get a little bit too much inside a character's head, and you kind of lose that point of view sort of thing. I have to kind of, the book, Stupid Dead Boy, the book I'm writing at the moment, I've really set myself, okay, I am stuck in this one character's head, because otherwise I'll kind of weirdly start living all of them. Yeah. and then it becomes a little bit unclear. You sort of go, oh, wow, he's now playing that minor character, and we're getting to know that minor character a little too well. we really don't need to know.
The other thing you find too, when you start getting that deep into, which you do, I think if you change point of view, you end up very deep in other people's characters, is it's very hard to remember where the reader is and what they know and don't know.
Yes. Absolutely.
How about you, Amy? Do you create character sheets? Do you have wikis of your characters? Or
no, mine's very, very, very unconscious. I think I do it all. Like, I do a lot of pre-writing. I think I've said before, it takes me forever to start the first draft. I often start things 3 or 4 times before I get there, and I think that's about nailing the character. If I can get the characters done, they just take over and do their bit. But it takes me a long time to get there. But I probably do a lot of daydreaming and thinking about character. And one of the best resources I found years ago at a conference, I saw her speak, is there's a woman named Deborah Dixon, who's an author. I think I might have put it in the course you're currently teaching, Sean. There might be a week's lecture on it.
Yeah.
And she wrote a book called Goal, Motivation, Conflict, about how you get to conflict through character. And I've found her work really helpful. And sometimes it's helpful at second draft or third draft when something's not working, when you haven't motivated someone well enough, when some action happens and you're kind of like, well, that feels a bit forced or that's a bit quick.
Yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine, particularly arguments that come out of nowhere. Happens in theatre a lot.
Yeah. And happens in romance a lot.
Why are you guys arguing? You have no real, you've gone from 0 to 10.
Yeah.
For no reason.
So her book really is dealing with that, and she talks about how goal is what your character wants, motivation is why they want it, and then conflict is why they can't have it. And that if you bring, every scene should have those arcs, and every kind of chapter should have those arcs of what do they want, and they can be smaller things. So every scene they have to want something, otherwise it doesn't work on the page. And that really helped me. Like, don't use it consciously. But I think I'm probably always thinking about it in the back of my mind, so that now my first drafts are much more polished, because I think it's like a film, right? If it doesn't move the story forward, it has to go.
It has to go. We say all the time in drama that all drama is conflict, and that's true of Home and Away, that's true of Star Wars. It basically boils down to someone wants something, someone's in the way. And I think it's good to go back to those first principles when you find yourself meandering, I think.
I think what's really useful about hers specifically is then every single time she talks about it in terms of external conflict and internal conflict, that there has to be something emotionally getting in their way. I mean, that's what Sean's talking about with Starkiller, right? Is that you excavated this history for him, and this history of being an abused person, and then there are all kinds of ways we screw ourselves up, like we're constantly getting in our own ways. And,
absolutely.
And finding that for each character, how are they fucking up their own life?
Yes, because we usually are our own worst enemies. The classic one that we use a lot, or I whip this one out a lot. I don't think many students these days are familiar with Jaws, but it's a really good one, because
I love Jaws.
They always say that drama should have three conflicts. It's a bit sexist, but man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself, or woman versus woman, woman versus nature, woman versus himself. And at the climax of a drama, those three conflicts should come together. And Jaws does it extremely well, because Chief Brody is the main character in Jaws. He's in conflict with another man who is the mayor, who wants to keep the beach open. He's in conflict with nature, and that's a bit of a no-brainer. There's a shark eating everybody. But
it doesn't get much more obvious than that.
It's pretty clear. But the really interesting part is he's in conflict with himself, because he's actually terrified of the water, which is the thing that everyone forgets about Jaws. So the end, he confronts the mayor, he gets in a boat, he confronts his fear of the water, and he takes on the shark. So all three of those conflicts, the external, the internal, the conflict with nature, and I think if you can nail that in a story and it all comes together in that moment, very, very hard to do, but that's where you get the goosebumps in a story, I think.
Yeah, that's where it's so satisfying, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's easy to admire it when it's happening. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually says she's a psychologist, but this was some of the best character advice I ever got. She always said your strengths are your weaknesses, and that if you can identify your character's strengths, they will also be their weaknesses. So if they're determined, they're probably also stubborn. If you could think of 6 billion. If they're principled, they might also be a bit unyielding.
I think that's brilliant. We were talking about that this week with the students with Antigone, the ancient Greek play, and we were saying her fatal flaw is also her strength. She's stubborn and strong. It's true of Macbeth. Macbeth is super ambitious. That could be a good thing, but it becomes a fatal flaw when you start stabbing all your friends.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you think about yourself too, like what your strengths are and how they're also your weaknesses. And in terms of process too, and yourself as an artist, like your strengths are your weaknesses.
This is becoming like therapy again.
Well, Alex is great at dialogue, right? But you were saying that then your flaw is that you often slip into dialogue and forget to do the other things.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. What's your flaw?
I love secondary characters, so they tend to take over too much.
I have that flaw too. I've got two flaws. What about you, Sean?
My flaw is that I don't know what my flaws are. I know I have lots of flaws.
That's like one of those perfect. Job interview answers.
Yes.
I know it is, isn't it?
I might just try too hard. I think I love my work too much. I'm not making any claims like that. I think I can think of process flaws, lots of process flaws. Like I love doing first drafts. I don't like stopping. I love keeping on going, which makes me incredibly prolific, but it also means that maybe if I went a bit slower, my work would be a bit more polished. I don't know. But in terms of characters, I'll have to give this some serious thought. I've learned something today.
We were
You're going to trigger some kind of nervous breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it relates back to work-life balance as well, that I can get obsessed with a draft and keep going and then think, I haven't seen anyone for a few days, so that can be an issue. How's this one? I want to run this one by you. We were talking about Anakin Skywalker the other day in class. and we said that his flaw is that he loves too much or he loves too hard.
It's not. Is it love though?
Well, it's a selfish, obsessive, possessive.
I don't know that he'd survived the Me Too era kind of rewrites.
But it is an interesting thing.
I really can't stand what they did to Padme Amidala.
Oh, no, neither can I.
So poor.
It's very poor. But it is an interesting thing that if that had been done well, you could argue that his strength and his weakness were one and the same. I often do this in class. I'll talk about Macbeth, realise that 90% of the people in the room have no idea what I'm talking about. And then I'll go, okay, Anakin. Okay.
It's interesting, though, talking about character, because then if you think about the latest Star Wars films, listening to Mark Hamill talk about the way they wrote Luke, and he doesn't feel Luke would have done any of those things. It's interesting about that character consistency.
But also about ownership, right, between an actor and an author, because that can be really interesting too, where you might be rewriting something and an actor who's invested in a certain amount of rehearsal, or maybe has only done a few reads, but suddenly says, oh, I've started to develop my version of who this person is, and there's no way they would do that thing. That's an interesting space, I think.
Do you know what I've been struggling with the last few years is, because I was writing romance for a few books there, and you have these two main characters, and in each book, one of the main characters would just take over and the other one was a bit softer and harder. And there were a couple of characters I really struggled with because they just felt too passive. And there is that weird space of feeling like, well, that's authentic to that character, but also I don't want them to be all wet. I want them to get some drive. So how do you beef up someone who is a little bit weaker on the page? If you've got one really strong personality that just hijacks the page, what do you do with the other characters?
Well, passivity is a kind of strength as well, isn't it? I mean, the decision not to engage, not to be at the forefront is still a decision. I'm thinking of introverts. Introverts lead complex and rich lives and exert all sorts of interesting controls over their environment, but just not in a very obvious way. How you portray that without being inside the head of that character is a really interesting challenge that is not unsolvable. I think you just have to start looking for different cues and present them to the reader as the cues you want them to be. So little signs become signs of incredible import once the reader knows the context.
Yeah, I think just as you were talking, it occurred to me that sense of humour actually has been a way in of trying it, because everyone has such a distinct sense of humour. And once you've got someone's sense of humour down, you've kind of nailed what kind of intelligence they have and what kind of personality they have. Humour's
great. I don't write comedy at all, but I love using humour now as a way of surprising the reader and surprising the characters as they interact with each other. Because humour's so spontaneous and a rich source of an unusual kind of drama.
That's what you trade in, Alex, isn't it? Humour. Like yours is very funny.
Well, I think I'm sorry, I just got engrossed listening and forgot that I'm actually part of the podcast, but which is probably a good sign. But I enjoy villains with a sense of humour, because a villain with a sense of humour is completely unfiltered, unguarded, and they will say and do the darkest stuff. Yeah.
Most villains don't have a sense of humour if you think about it. So once you have one with a sense of humour, they're much more frightening.
Well, there's a supreme confidence in that. One of the things they say about...
they link humour to intelligence. So it's also probably, on an instinctual level, we recognise that as someone who's very, very intelligent.
And is therefore, a few steps ahead. One of the things they say about really good villains, and I'm again thinking about bloody Star Wars again. I've got to move on. Or,
I'm thinking about Star Wars too, so you're not alone.
Or, Ian McKellen in X-Men. Villains that are so supremely confident or any Bond villain, they're supremely confident because they think they're 10 steps ahead. Lex Luthor's like this too. They think they're going to win. And so they literally don't really do anything until the last 2 minutes. Their plan is in motion. But, the Emperor in Star Wars doesn't get off that chair until he absolutely has to, because he thinks he's got it all won, right? And then right at the end he goes, oh, okay, I'm going to have to get up now and blast you with lightning. So, villains, I think it's their smarminess and their confidence that's a lot of fun to write.
Too.
It's narcissism. Generally, they're narcissistic and Machiavellian and I'm watching Killing Eve at the moment.
Yes.
And, I talk about a character who's 10 steps ahead. It's really engrossing to watch because you go through this thing. Your initial reaction is, this person is horrible and abhorrent. And then you go, this person's brilliant. They're getting away with it. And then before you know it, you find yourself in this really uncomfortable space where you don't necessarily want them to lose. And I think that can happen with a really well-written villain. You go, oh, you're a monster, but I'm kind of with you, Or is that just me?
You're making me want to write villains now. I just want to go write villains.
I tend to have books that don't have villains, it's something that I've really got to work on. Apart from Star Wars and some of my early novels, I like writing about nice people who have conflicts with each other instead of monsters and things like that. I don't know what that means.
So what's the worst
means
character
you're nice,
you've ever
Sean.
written? What's the kind of most unlikable, nasty character you've ever written, and not Vader? Someone not Vader.
Although just harking back to senses of humour and bad guys, the dad joke in, was it Rogue One by Darth Vader, was one of the lowest points of villain writing I've ever seen.
Is that the line about aspirations? Is that the one?
Yes, don't do choke on your aspirations or whatever it was. Just terrible. Oh, awful. It's so bad we have to laugh. Look, I've written all sorts of horrible characters in horror writing. In fact, I've got to write a short story right now that's so horrific. I can't actually write from the point of view of the main character. It has to be written in this exploded, deconstructed kind of way through the testimonies of the people who've uncovered the crime and are piecing it together bit by bit. It's just too foul. But I was tempted to write from that person's point of view because it comes from a place of great need and vulnerability. I just didn't want to describe in detail what they did. Too horrible.
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to live there. Oh, no. Look, my rogues gallery of horrible people. I'm writing a play at the moment for for a local director, and I don't know if this play is even going to happen. I'm at first draft stage and I'll probably finish it this week. But there's a character called Harlow who is an agent. She's a talent agent, and she's probably the most horrible person I've ever written, moment to moment. And it's the most fun I've ever had because whenever I get bored, I go, what's Harlow doing? She's named after Jean Harlow. And it's not a real name. It's like a glamour name. And then so you don't even know who she really is. And I don't even want to know. I kind of drop hints where people talk a little bit about her past, but it's kind of better not to know. But she is so snarky because she's the nightmare version of what an agent can be, manipulative and it is in kind of the actor model space, but then she's also a serial killer, so it goes to another level. Wow. And I'm just having a lot of fun and feeling pretty horrendous about it. But
how's your agent going to feel when you?
I don't know. Not great, probably. But she's absolutely taken over the whole thing.
I think I've had in the Westerns a lot of horrible characters, a lot of gunslingers and murderers and rapists and horrors. There's the last book that came out in December features what they call the Great Hunt, which is where this group, Rogues Gallery, is basically hunting the hero. And that's got some of the worst characters I've ever had to write. It was great. It was so much fun.
Do you know what I've realised? We've spent most of this episode talking about villains and not very much about heroes, a little bit about heroes. A friend of mine likes to say that if you're writing heroes and villains, this is Tim Powers, a fantasy writer from America, that put people you admire in your books by all means, but show their bad sides as well. Show them doing bad things. Show someone you love and respect doing a bad thing. And same with people you despise. Show them patting a puppy. I'm sure even Darth Vader may have picked up a kitten at some point in his career. Do they have kittens in the Star Wars universe?
They do. They have these
space puppies, kittens.
They actually do have these space kittens now. I'm not even making this up. And they're turning up. They're in The Mandalorian. They're in the animated series. Both of them, I think. I can't remember what they're called, but there's some kind of Star Wars cat, and they're everywhere.
Are they tribbles? Did they cross?
They're a bit like tribbles.
Cross-pollinate. Yeah.
Mashups.
Why not? That's a great sort of romance idea, isn't it? The mashup as a...
I do think with heroes, the main problem is not making them boring.
Yeah.
And I think the deeper you can get into their point of view and show their doubts and their fears, and because the last thing anyone wants is a goody two-shoes.
Yeah, or you fall back on that thing where someone is chosen and they're perfect, and I think we're probably a little bit beyond that now.
Oh, I don't know. There's always a new audience coming up behind us who's never seen that kind of story before. and
Yeah, I
thinks
suppose
it's the
that's
best thing
true.
ever.
I learn that every year with students, and the older I get, the less my pop cultural references have any
Oh, I
currency.
know. That moment where you've lost all respectability. I will say, just to bring it back to Star Wars, since that's our text of the day, that I think this is why a lot of people way prefer Han Solo to Luke, right? Luke's a little bit gooby. He's a bit
Yeah,
too
I mean,
nice and
or
good.
Jack Sparrow to whoever the hell Orlando Bloom plays. I don't even know.
He's
you
just
know.
a bit cardboard in that, isn't he? He doesn't have that much of a character.
Wolverine to Cyclops. I mean, who cares about Cyclops?
The good guy who has to work hard to be good, I think, is way more interesting. The good woman who has to work hard to be good. They're so much more interesting. Like Melanie in Gone with the Wind is so boring compared to Scarlet.
Or the
Becky
girl with the
Sharp
dragon
compared to
tattoo.
Amelia.
Who's the
Yeah.
girl with the dragon tattoo?
I've forgotten her name.
What's that character called?
You're being Nana Joy this episode now.
Oh, I am being Nana Joy.
We're all
You know that girl in that
You know the
Joy.
girl in that movie you know her. Anyway.
It's something Salander? Is it Elizabeth?
Lisbeth.
Something like
Yes. I mean, there's a character who's deeply complex and introverted.
Now
too,
we
getting
really
back
sound
to
old.
what-
Not only are we struggling for the cultural reference, we're like going through all these weird names to get there.
But she's an introverted character, but has a very rich internal life. That's an example, I think, because she doesn't speak very much, but her presence is felt by everyone.
I guess the lesson here is to write not heroes and villains, but to write real people.
Yes.
Which you should do with every character. That's my feeble attempt to tie this episode up with a bow.
We're very hard to corral, aren't we? We're like space cats.
We are like space kittens. That's right. Well, I think it's time to call it a break. My wonderful colleagues. I don't know what we're going to talk about next episode, but I'm sure we'll think of something.
We will, because we've got lots of time while we're locked in to think of topics. And actually, do you know, if you've got any topics you would like to hear from us, do use our social media and reach out to us at Word Docs. You can find us on the Ozcast page, all our different contact details. Do let us know if there's a topic you want us to cover.
Brilliant. Great idea.
Thanks. Stay well. Stay inside. Stay safe.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them start with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Don't say happy writing. Don't say it.
What are the consequences
No, we
if I
have
do?
to.
No, don't say it. To everyone out there, enjoy the gift of the written word.
Amy, are you hearing clipping there when Alex says
Yeah.
that? Yes,
I am.
I might
Are you
say.
very close?
I'm
Try
quite
sitting
far
back a
back.
bit more.
How about
you
from
really?
here?
Oh, it's just your voice.
It's such a powerful, resonant voice.
It's
See,
a
now you're too
trained
far away.
voice.
Okay, from here, how's this?
That's good.
Okay. To everyone out there, please enjoy the gift of the written word.
See you next time.